Hey, Mr. Lee, how are you? Happy New Year. Scott Church and Stream Punk Soccer. Talk a little bit about the decision to go away from Coach Cushing and go in the direction of Pascal Jansen and where you see 2025 going. Thank you.
Yeah, hey Scott, Happy New Year. So I think, as we get to the end of every season, I think there's a natural point to evaluate where we are as an organization, where we are as a club, and most importantly, how we see what we think is the best path to move the organization forward in the coming years. And so, as we ended the 2024 season, as we evaluate everything as we do all the time, we felt like there would be an opportunity if we were to make a change at head coach that we could see an improved performance level, and we could maybe see some improvement also in the development of some of our young players, which ultimately will also help us win more games and hopefully show a little bit more consistency than we saw in the 2024 season. So then once we made that decision, we felt like it was the right thing to do was to make that decision as quickly as we possibly could at the end of the season, to then give us enough opportunity to go through an extensive coaching search, to make sure that we could bring the best candidate forward. And we're really pleased that we were able to get Pascal appointed and hired and able to start working with the group early into the preseason.
Chris?
Hey, David, Chris Cameron from the outfield. I'm kind of expanding on that. You mentioned the coaching search that ended with the hire of Pascal. Can you kind of talk into how that search went along, how Pascal was identified, and ultimately who made the decision to hire him?
Yeah, so part of the work of I think any sporting director is to always be aware of potential opportunities. So even though you're hopefully never in the need to make coaching changes, coaches can need to be changed because similar to maybe when Ronnie left, and because they get recruited from another club. And so part of our work is to constantly monitor coaches. And so Pascal was somebody that actually been on our radar from City Football Group for a very long time. And so we hadn't had any conversations with him, but he was somebody that from his profile we felt like was really interesting, given what he'd done at AZ Alkmaar in terms of his performance on the pitch, his development of young talent, the style of football that he played. And so as we once we made the decision to part ways with Nick, we then went to our database of coaches that we had been tracking and following, and then we went through obviously getting a lot of inbound interest in the role, given who we are in MLS, and being part of City Football Group was really attractive to an awful lot of candidates. And then we went through shortlisting from there. Pascal was part of that process, as somebody that we felt like would be interesting to speak to. It's important to say that Pascal was in a really good job prior to coming to New York, and was in a good job. And so we wanted to make sure that this was something that he really wanted to do. And I was really pleased and proud after we'd spoken to him and had those conversations that moving to New York and being part of New York City FC was something that he was just as interested in doing as we were interested in bringing him to the club. And so ultimately that decision is mine. It's my job to make a recommendation to both City Football Group on the football technical side, and then our ownership group. We have an immense amount of support and collaboration from City Football Group. So the interview process is run collaboratively between both New York and City Football Group, because we work so closely together. But ultimately then, as we go through that process, it's incumbent upon me to make a recommendation to City Football Group and to our owners of the direction that I think we should go.
Alex Windley?
Hi, David. This is Alex Finley from AM New York. When you first hired Pascal, what stood out to you the most about his coaching philosophy and leadership style, and what made him the right fit for NYCFC right now? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think there were a number of factors that made Pascal interesting. And so, as we went into this coaching search, we tried to be really clear on some of the criteria that we were going to look for in a potential head coach. And probably to summarize those, it was we feel like we've got a really talented group of players that we think can be competitive to win trophies over the coming years. And so we wanted a head coach that had experience winning, and Pascal's got that in his prior jobs. We have assembled a roster that has a lot of young talent, but also talent that we think can improve and develop. And so we wanted also to find somebody that had trust and faith in playing young players, wanted to develop young talent as part of a winning philosophy. And again, Pascal, the track record Pascal in young player development is outstanding. In particular, AZ Alkmaar, and the number of players that left AZ Alkmaar to play at the highest levels in Europe is something that was also really attractive for us. And then third, from a sort of characteristic side, was the style of play. We've assembled a roster. We have a way of playing that we believe, from ownership group all the way down, that we would like a New York City FC team to play. And we think it's really important that any head coach is philosophically aligned to those ideals. I will say that every head coach we've had, from Patrick to Dome to Ronnie, Kush, and now Pascal, there's always slight tweaks in style, and those things come out as we learn about the coach and as they get used to the players and they put their demands on the players. But I think philosophically, we want to be a team that controls the game via possession, which means we're going to need to be aggressive out of possession. We want to create chances and score lots of goals. And so, for us, Pascal, has proven to play in a style that is similar to what we would like to see in our team. And so that felt like there was a really good overlap and mesh from that perspective as well. And then you mentioned, leadership style. Head coach is the most important person in the building. Here I am at CFA every single day, and he needs to set the tone for the environment. And I think, Pascal, again, has got almost 200 games of experience of running a team. And he's got a really good demeanor with the players. He's really demanding. He has really high standards, but equally, he's got a really good feel and a way to want to get to know the players and be close to the players and understand them as people, which we believe is also, and I know Pascal believes as well, is really critical to maximizing their development.
We're going to go in the room. Glenn?
Hey, David, Glenn Crooks. So every one of your responses, you talked about young players and their development. So I would imagine as you're evaluating your head coach, that's going to be something you look at specifically. But the players that come to mind are Julian Fernandez, Agustino Heda, Ilinic, and maybe Mijatovic if he comes back. So are you looking at maybe how those players in particular develop?
I think we're looking at how the whole roster develops, to be totally honest. There's a focus on young players. Of course, we have assembled and we've acquired what we believe is a group of really talented young players. I think you didn't mention, Maximo Carrizo, Zidane Yanez, Johnny Shaw, Drew Baera, that are produced from the academy and are just as important that we maximize their development as well. But I think, it is all within the context of, this is our approach to how we believe we can be most successful by winning. We want to win trophies. And we believe part of that strategy from our ownership and from everybody connected with New York City and City Football Group is to do that via developing young talent. The better players you can develop, the more chance you are of winning games of football. And so, developing players is a core component for us, and absolutely will be part of how a head coach is assessed, is through the work that they do and how they develop all of the players that are in the squad, not just the young players, because more senior players can develop as well. But that is a core focus of what we need our coaching environment to look like, is how those players are going to improve, because we're almost never going to sign perfectly finished players, and they're going to need to improve and develop, and that's something that we are looking forward to seeing during this season and beyond.
We'll go with Oliver.
Hi, thank you. This is Oliver Strand with Hudson River Blue. You've been pretty quiet this transfer window. That's in contrast to the winter window last year when you were quite active, and then in the summer you were quite quiet again. What can we expect this transfer window? Will there be some incoming players?
Yeah, we certainly expect so. I think part of the maybe slow or quiet, as you described it, is, one thing we want to do is we want to give Pascal an opportunity to work with the group. In MLS, it doesn't make sense to acquire players that then block the pathway of somebody that might emerge as somebody really important for Pascal. And so, we've obviously been looking at players and we have targets in mind, and the window's still open for quite a long time for us right now. So we certainly anticipate signing players before the close of the window. But I do think, in my experience, having gone through, a couple of coaching changes as sporting director, there are always players that emerge when you change a head coach that become really important players that maybe you hadn't expected. And similarly, there are players that maybe had a really important role under a previous head coach that may not under the new head coach. And so, trying to give Pascal the opportunity to work with a group and see, get his feel for the players, and ultimately try and also get some experience in MLS and get a better feel for that, I think is an important part. We've got a pretty complete squad. We've lost, in terms of really important players that played maybe significant minutes last season. We've had obviously James depart, we had Christian McFarlane, we had Jovan leave, and so we've got out of those players, we've got 3 open roster spots as it stands right now, and so we still have quite a full roster when you look at it in totality, and so we're trying to be really strategic with making sure that the additions that we do make are the players that are going to come in and improve what we think is already a strong and deep overall roster.
We'll go with Michael Ender.
Hey, Dave, it's Mike Andrew from Blue City Radio. Thanks for the time. Jovan Mijatovic's loan seemed kind of abrupt. Can you just tell us your side of the story of what happened there?
Yeah, I think probably wasn't abrupt from our side. We had an honest conversation with Jovan at the end of last season. I think it's quite clear, the year didn't go how Jovan expected, how we expected last season, and those things are unfortunately part of the life in professional sports, and and it didn't work last season how we all hoped it would when we signed Jovan. There are a lot of factors involved in that, but ultimately, Jovan's a 19-year-old boy still with a huge amount of potential, and my job is to try to make sure that we ensure that he has a pathway to continue developing. And so we had to look at our roster and say, okay, do we really see him playing, starting the season as our number 9, based on where we were at the end of last season? And probably the answer to that was no, given how well Alonso had done at the end of last season. And so therefore it made sense for all parties to try to find a solution that will enable him to play more regular football. And so, we think this opportunity in Leuven is a good one for him. It's a loan through the summer so he can get adjusted and adapted. I think it's also fair to say that Jovan expressed an interest to be back in Europe as well. It's his first time moving away from home. For a 19-year-old, those things are not easy. And in particular, right now, I think there's a desire, and of course, we all want the instant success. And we do have to remember sometimes these are young men, young people, and we've got to help support them and on their journey and development. And so we felt like it was the right thing to try to give him a platform where he maybe had a better chance of playing more regularly. We've invested significant money in him. We still believe he has an absolutely fantastic future and potential in world football. And our job now is to try to help him on the next steps in his journey. We felt like a loan would be the right situation, maybe not hugely dissimilar to the decision that we took last summer when Thales Magno wasn't playing significantly for us, trying to find a situation where he could go and play. And so far that's been a good thing for him in Brazil to get those minutes and get the opportunity to get himself going again after a little period of stagnation. And it's probably similar to how we felt with Jovan.
We're going to go with Adam and then back to Glenn in the room.
Hey, David, this is Adam with Post 90. Can you just speak a bit to how you and the club measure the success of a manager, both on the field and beyond?
Yeah, I think, we're trying to take into account absolutely everything that happens. And that's a difficult, maybe too broad of an answer. But, the environment of the training ground, the work that we do, the connection that a coach has with the players, with the staff, of course, results are a critical part of that. In my opinion, I felt like we were a really inconsistent group last year, and we saw periods of what was an absolutely top performing group in MLS, particularly that period, April, May, where we won 8 of 9. I said to a few people, we got 24 points in those 9 matches in April and May. And we got 26 points in the other 24 matches in the whole season, or 25 matches in the whole season. So that was just a sign of real inconsistency. And so that results are absolutely part of it. And I just believe that, and so we're trying to take into account all of those factors. And there is a soft side, there is a gut feel, there is an environmental factor that you can only really sense and feel if you're in the environment every single day, and you try and take all of that into account. you try and take into account the resources that they've had available. So, in 2023, we did not make the playoffs, but we didn't change head coach at the end of that season because we know that we were going through a period of rebuilding that team, and we did. So we didn't feel like that was the right decision at that point when we considered all of those factors. And as we made that decision at the end of 2024, we came to a different conclusion.
Glenn?
David, I wonder what your feeling is about this new cash for player trades within the league. And you talked about you have 3 open roster spots and you anticipate you might sign a player or players before the close of the window. Do you think this will be a factor at all? And what do you think of it?
I think it's a great development. I actually think it's one of the bigger rule changes that MLS has seen in the last few years. I don't think that we collectively as a league will see the full effect of the rule change. And probably for another window or two as teams get familiar with it. I think we're all still learning exactly how it works because it's been implemented a little bit on the fly, but we've obviously already started to see some transactions happening with it. I think the biggest thing was in MLS, there was essentially a group of players that were completely unobtainable to move inside MLS because you could only trade your allocation money and every team has a limited pot of allocation money. Now you can open the door to essentially recruit from inside MLS that really was quite challenging before to assess the right value, how much allocation money you had. And now being able to use cash for those players, I think it opens up obviously possibility for DP investments and acquiring DPs from other teams, potentially that was not possible before because those values you could never acquire with GAM. But I also think it opens up possibilities for players within the salary cap as well. So we'll certainly explore it. We're certainly looking at it to see if there's a right fit within the league. Obviously, there's a benefit to those players being able to come in ready to go, experience with the league already. But ultimately, we still got to find the right value to be able to bring those players into the group.
Alec?
Hey, David. Good to speak to you again. Alec Kossoff, 5 Bro Footy. Forgive me, my question's a little bit long-winded. Recently on the American Soccer Analytics podcast, the head of FC Dallas spoke about U22 signings being amongst the most difficult signings to make just based on analytics. I would say NYCFC has had successes and failures as it pertains to first team minutes for these signings. So I wanted to ask generally, what is NYCFC's strategy as it pertains to these signings? And specifically, do you see them more as an immediate impact investment or more long-term investment?
Yeah, good question. And so when you acquire any young talent, there is inherently, in my opinion, slightly more risk because young people develop at different rates, and so there is slightly more risk associated with signing younger players. So I probably wouldn't disagree with the sentiment that U22s can be risky investments. I think there also can be huge positives and upsides to those players, and the opportunity to develop a young player, to sign a player that previously probably you wouldn't have been able to afford or you wouldn't have been able to afford within a salary cap, now is available to you with the U22 initiative. That opens up a group of players to acquire that you hope and you believe can improve and develop and become even more important players for you over the longer term. So our strategy is we want to acquire the best talent that we possibly can, using as many roster mechanisms and using as much financial resources as I'm given to be able to spend between the discretionary investments possible to try to bring as many good players. And we do believe, and I would say probably sort of philosophically, organizationally from City Football Group, across the group, we believe in acquiring and developing young talent. And so the U22 initiative is a way that we believe that you can acquire good young talent, develop it, and ultimately that can help you on the pitch, and it can help you from a business perspective in generating revenue for our business that I'm also asked to do each year. And so that's something that is that we believe is an important avenue. Of course, there is elements of risk with any signing, but maybe slightly more so when you talk about young players. But it's our job to do the work and due diligence to try to reduce that risk as much as we possibly can. And as you say, there's been some really good successes with some of those players already. I believe we have 2 really talented U22 players in our roster right now in Julian and Agustin, and I believe hopefully we'll see important roles for them coming up this season.
Final question. We'll go with Matt.
Hey, David, Matt Mangum, Hudson River Blue. Of course, you mentioned the team, pretty much all the players returning, the starters from last year, except for James Sands, you could say. So what's the general expectation for Pascal in his first year with this team, just in MLS and in Leagues Cup and everything else?
Yeah, so I think expectation that we discussed with Pascal, our organization expectation is to be competitive, to win as many times as much as we possibly can in as many competitions as possible. We know in MLS that's not easy. I've said this to the staff repeatedly, but the last 3 MLS Cup winners did not qualify for the playoffs the year before they won. It is inherently difficult to be sort of that consistently successful that you win every year. Even if you look at the top 7 teams in the Eastern Conference from 2023 to 2024, there was only 3 teams that were in the top 7 both years. So just repeating and maintaining that consistency is not easy. We've shown from 2016 to 2022 a really high degree of consistency from 2nd, 3rd, 4th. I think one year we finished 5th in 2020 in COVID. So we've seen a real sort of high level of consistency, and that's what we want to get back to. If we're consistently in the playoffs, you give yourself a chance to win trophies, and ultimately we want to win trophies for our fans. So the expectation of what we want to do is we want to be competitive to win as many trophies. What that looks like with US Open Cup, what that looks like with Leagues Cup, I think will depend on where the roster is, injuries, all those pieces. As I say, we've got a group of really talented young players that also need opportunities to develop and play. I think we saw last year, maybe the best example being Christian, of a player who before the season maybe nobody really knew, but when he came into the team, I think he showed how ready he was to be able to play at MLS level, and in Leagues Cup he played a lot. And so I think that's going to be a really good opportunity for us also to give some opportunities, or for some of the young players to earn opportunities to get minutes. But ultimately, we want to try and win all those titles, and the job is to try and work with the resources that we have and the resources we get given to be able to build a strong roster as we possibly can.